Welcome back. All right, news of the day video for all you fine people on the internet for your Thursday, April the 3rd. Also previewing tonight's action. We got 9 games tonight in the National Hockey League. So busy night. Pretty spread out schedule though from here till the end of the season, honestly. And yeah, I also, you'll notice I'm not putting the team's records on the board because that just seems to mean less and less as the season goes along. Now it's just about who is within striking distance of which teams and which teams are too far ahead to catch, that kind of thing. We'll start at the top of the board. So there was debate coming out of last night's game about whether or not there would be supplemental discipline when it came to the Washington-Carolina game, specifically for Jalen Chatfield for the takedown on Connor McMichael, and the answer is no. There will be no supplemental discipline there. That game escalated very quickly. And the last, I think it's 7:02, there was over 100 penalty minutes there alone. So, pretty fighty game. And we'll see if the next one is as well. Very well could be. They meet each other again before the regular season is done. Should be a very interesting game. And the fun part about it is that with Washington pretty firmly in first place, Carolina pretty firmly in second place, really that's what's on the line there, as well as, Ovechkin may still be trying to set the goal mark if he hasn't set it already at that point. So, yeah, could be a fun night out the next time Carolina and Washington play again. Patrick Roy informed the press today that Anthony Duclair and himself had a conversation. He came out and ripped Duclair after the last game, and Duclair is taking some time off, some time to think things over. To me, this sounds like it's a relationship that may very well be near that breaking point between Duclair and the Islanders organization. It will be interesting to see if, when the season is done, whether they make a change behind the bench in New York or if Duclair ends up being moved or what happens there. I think he's still just in year one of a 4-year contract, so your guess is as good as mine as to what will happen with Anthony Duclair, a player who has been through a number of teams in the National Hockey League. He's one of those players that I look at and say, he could pass Mike Sillinger at some point for the most teams having been played for. And maybe this leads to him playing for another one. So Duclair stepping away and knowing how close the playoffs are and the Islanders are still technically within striking distance, frustrating. Got to be frustrating. And so we'll see what happens, and if Duclair comes back, in a week's time. Like when somebody's taking some time off just to, think things over and figure out what they want to do, that's just really nicely vague. So no idea what's going to happen there. The Edmonton Oilers are hopeful that Trent Frederic's going to make his debut during their road trip. For the Oilers, getting Frederic on their wing will help. Frederic is a sandpaper type of player. He can score goals as well. And I think when looking at their wings, yeah, he should help when he comes in. I don't know how many goals he'll score. He can be very hot and cold, as a lot of players are in the NHL. But it is going to be interesting to see what that does to change the makeup of the Edmonton Oilers with Trent Frederic in the lineup. So we may see him very soon. He's seen as being relatively close to making his debut with the Edmonton Oilers. Brady Tkachuk isn't playing tonight against Tampa. Very, very key game, I think, for both teams, although we'll get into how Ottawa's kind of comfortable in the position they have in the standings right now. But Brady Tkachuk still being listed as day-to-day, and just no updates on how long he might be out. So this might be one of those day-to-day things that isn't actually day-to-day, where he's going to be out for weeks. Or maybe he comes back and plays the next game, but he will not play tonight against Tampa. And for Tampa, that's a big game, so they'll probably be glad that Tkachuk's not in the lineup. No updates from Washington yet. I did search around today to see if there's any updates on Logan Thompson. I haven't seen any. My theory that I actually stated the other night after he allowed 7 goals was it didn't look like Logan Thompson's been himself. And I also saw reports on how since he signed his extension, his numbers have dropped off. I think he got hurt. I do. I think he got hurt, and I get the feeling he aggravated it last night and finally had to take himself out of the net. And with the team now having lost 4 of their last 5, and now there's some uncertainty when it comes to the goaltending, the Washington Capitals definitely trending in the wrong direction at the absolute worst possible time of the year. There is time for them, obviously, to get it together over the next couple of weeks and going into the playoffs, but Logan Thompson's status is something to keep an eye on. Because earlier in the season, Thompson was stealing him games. And now it's kind of gone the other way where the goaltending hasn't been as sharp. And I feel like there has to be something going on with Thompson because he was allowing some goals that he hadn't been allowing earlier in the season. So you put those things together, and very often it equals an injury. They just don't talk about it. Goaltenders and hockey players in general will try to play through being hurt. There's the one thing I love with Shoresy, the TV show, where they're talking about being hurt versus being injured and how they're different. And I'm thinking, hockey players will totally get this and hockey fans will totally get this. There are others that might scratch their head going, well, if you're hurt, aren't you injured? No, it's not the same thing. So we have two teams that can clinch playoff spots tonight, one in the West and one in the East. Out West, Colorado can clinch. They can clinch just straight out with a win. They win in any fashion, they clinch. Or if they get a point, so if they get an overtime or shootout loss, and the Flames lose in any fashion against the Ducks, or if the Flames lose in regulation, Colorado clinches a spot. Tampa, very similar situation for Tampa. They clinch with a win as well if they win tonight in Ottawa, or if they get a point, so overtime or shootout loss, and the Habs lose in any fashion against Boston, not likely, or Columbus loses in any fashion. So with Columbus playing against Colorado, I would say it's more likely that Columbus takes the loss than Montreal because Boston hasn't been beating anybody for a while. But at any rate, those are your clinching scenarios for teams in the West and in the East. So now we move on. 9 games tonight. 2 starting at 7 Eastern, 4 Pacific, 1 a half an hour later, 2 a half an hour after that, and then we got 4 that are later on in the evening. So nicely spread out for a 9-game schedule. 7 Eastern, 4 Pacific, the Boston Bruins in Montreal against the Habs. This is normally a really, really exciting matchup for me. Tonight I'm going to be rooting for Montreal, which feels weird. Boston's dropped to the bottom of the East. They're 10 points out of the playoffs. And honestly, if Boston could somehow win the draft lottery, that'd make me pretty happy. I know other people wouldn't be happy with that. Montreal's tied with the New York Rangers for that final playoff spot. I think it'd be fun if Montreal made it. So I'm kind of rooting for Montreal here. The Habs are also 2 points ahead of Columbus. I would never normally root for Montreal, but in this case, Boston's not making the playoffs, so I don't have any emotional investment in them beating Montreal tonight. So sure, why not Montreal? 7 Eastern, 4 Pacific start. Tampa in Ottawa against the Ottawa Senators. Tampa Bay 3 points behind Toronto for first place in the division, but they're 1 point ahead of Florida in second place. Florida, with the slide they've been on, has now slipped down to third in the division, whereas Ottawa, they're 8 points behind Florida for that third spot, and they're 5 points ahead of Montreal in the number 1 wildcard spot. So Ottawa's pretty comfortable with where they're at. 7:30 Eastern, 4:30 Pacific, Colorado in Columbus against the Blue Jackets. Colorado, 6 points behind Dallas for second place in the division, and 7 points ahead of Minnesota and St. Louis, who are tied for that number 1/number 2 wildcard spot. Columbus is 2 points behind Montreal for that final playoff spot. Also, obviously, 2 points behind the Rangers. If Columbus wins tonight, they do themselves a huge favor. They do not do a favor, though, for Tampa, and they do not do a favor for Colorado if that's the case, especially in regulation. 8 Eastern, 5 Pacific start. Pittsburgh in St. Louis against the Blues. Pittsburgh, 8 points back of a playoff spot. Mathematically still alive. Really unlikely that they make a charge here. St. Louis has won 10 in a row. We know this. They are tied with Minnesota for that wild card spot in the West. And they're 7 points ahead of Calgary. Calgary's the top team below the playoff line. And so it shows just how far ahead St. Louis is. For all the discussion about how the Canucks kind of gave up last night, and I'm thinking, they know the season's over. Players aren't dumb. They know when the season's done. 8 Eastern, 5 Pacific start. Nashville in Dallas against the Stars. Nashville, not mathematically alive, but when it comes to Dallas, Nashville usually plays really well. At the very least, they're normally very entertaining games. Dallas, 4 points behind Winnipeg for top spot in the division. It is still technically possible they can do it. They're 6 points ahead of Colorado in second place. So Dallas is pretty comfortable in their home ice advantage in the first round at the very least. If they catch Winnipeg, it might be home ice advantage through the entire playoffs. When they won the Cup in '99, I believe they won the President's Trophy that year. 9 Eastern, 6 Pacific start. I don't know that for sure. I think they did, though. 9 Eastern, 6 Pacific start between the LA Kings and the Utah Hockey Club. LA 5 points behind Vegas for first place in the division and 2 points ahead of the Edmonton Oilers. Utah 9 points back of a playoff spot. They're not going to make it, but Utah playing spoiler pretty well overall over the last couple of weeks here. And so LA not as good on the road as they are at home. We'll see how things work out in Utah tonight. A Utah team that has been better on the road than at home. So we'll see. 9:30 Eastern, 6:30 Pacific start. The Anaheim Ducks in Calgary against the Flames. Anaheim 15 points back of a playoff spot. By my math, I think they could be eliminated if they lose in regulation tonight. The Calgary Flames 7 points back of a playoff spot. And again, the season I think is done. I do expect them to come out and put up a really big effort. I do think Calgary's going to win their share of games down the stretch. And then it's a matter of what Craig Conroy does this summer. But playoffs, I think, are out of reach. 10 Eastern, 7 Pacific start as well. Winnipeg in Vegas. So Winnipeg, tough time in LA. We'll see how things go in Las Vegas for them. They're 4 points clear of Dallas, as I said, in first place. Vegas 5 points ahead of LA in first place in their division. This is going to be a fascinating one. The Jets have had their issues in certain games recently, and so they're going to want to come out with their A game in Vegas against a Golden Knights team that I still think is going to be really dangerous in a couple weeks when the playoffs get rolling. 10:30 Eastern, 7:30 Pacific start, because there's a 7:30 start almost every day this week. The Oilers in San Jose against the Sharks. The Oilers 2 points behind LA, and in terms of the next fourth place team in their division is Calgary. So both wildcard spots being occupied by Central teams means the Oilers can't be passed unless it's Calgary. Calgary's 9 points back. So the top three are really set in the Pacific. San Jose, of course, not in the running, but San Jose trying to get above the 20 win mark, and I'm rooting for that. I want to see more than 20 wins for San Jose this year. But at the same time, the Oilers, I get the feeling, will come out with a really strong effort tonight because they kind of have to. If they want to continue to try to hunt down LA and maybe get home ice in that first round, it does feel like that's going to be really important in that series. They're going to need to get some wins here, and San Jose has to be a win for the Oilers if they want to keep getting up towards LA. LA may very well lose against Utah, and so we'll see how things go. But let me know your picks in the comment section below, as always. Don't forget to hit like and subscribe in the event that you may not have done so already. And thank you guys so much for all your support. It's greatly appreciated. I will talk to you again soon.